Welcome to Ask the Pastor with me, Steve Magno. On this channel, we discuss the scriptures like Bereans. We ask questions and we seek answers to better understand our God and the world that He has given us. Our greatest ideal is to glorify God, edify the saints, and pique the interest of truth seekers in the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ and His eternal kingdom on earth. We feature live streams and recorded teachings, including our Sunday services and Bible studies at the Well Church here in St. Louis, Missouri. Do not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can receive the latest broadcast from us. And I pray that you will be blessed. And please do get back with us and give us as much feedback as you can so that we can improve and make our channel as good as it can be. Thank you so much. All right, welcome once again to part number 2 of responding to the bitter, in my view. It may not that he may be bitter. But the title is responding to the bitter accusations of Pastor Boaz Macharia of Kenya against full preterism, part 2. So we already did part 1, and if you look in the description section down there, even if you are on Facebook or on YouTube, you will find part 1 already linked in the description section. So we have been looking at an article, a very long article. I'm not so sure that I'll be able to get to the very end of this article, but I will try my best. So I'll try to move faster in this particular edition. So Pastor Boaz Macharia calls full preterists non-Christians, no questions asked. He says, we are not believers in Jesus Christ. We are heretics. That's what he calls us. And of course, that is yet to be proven. And of course, we will try to see if we can present a case for ourselves that shows that no, we are faithful to the scriptures. So now I had gotten to this point where I read this statement where he says, this is his article. The preterist misinterprets the already but not yet nature of Christian prophecy. He misunderstands the way that prophecy unfolds in history. Near and this generation lose their prophetic effect. Near and this generation lose their prophetic effect. So that's why I want to start off the discussion this time. Does the preterist make the words near and this generation lose their prophetic effect? Well, let's examine that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the statement, this generation. Because you see, the preterist comes and says, and I'm a preterist, I'm a full preterist. I come and say, the statement, this generation, always, every time, without any veering from it, always means the generation Jesus is addressing. So I have a question presented here on Quora, which is a website where you can go and just present questions for people to discuss. And the question is asked, when Jesus uses the phrase, this generation, 14 times in the New Testament, which generation is he referring to? Since when he asked questions, he answered the people then who asked him. So now, in the Gospels, we have 14 times where Jesus uses the statement, this generation. So in the Gospels, the phrase, this generation, and related phrases plainly refer to the people alive at the time Jesus spoke. This includes some people who heard Jesus speak, still being alive when the Son of Man returns at the end of the days as described in the Olivet Discourse. Now, Matthew 11, Jesus says, but to what shall I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in marketplaces and calling to their playmates. We played the flute for you. You did not dance. We sang a dirge, a funeral song, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. And the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors. Yet wisdom is justified by her deeds. So when Jesus says, to whom shall I compare this generation, right here in Matthew 11:16, which generation is he referring to? There is unanimity. There is no controversy from any scholar. No biblical scholar looks at Matthew 11:16 rather, and says, well, he could be referring to a future generation. No. Matthew 11:16 refers only to the generation Jesus is referring to. So let's go to the next one. The next one is Luke 7, which is a parallel of Matthew 11. To what then shall I compare the people of this generation? And what are they like? And he will say the same thing. Again, since it's a parallel, we won't spend too much time there. It means the generation that lived at the time of Jesus. Okay. Since this generation is connected to those commenting on John the Baptist and Jesus's lifestyle, the phrase clearly refers to those who were alive at the time Jesus spoke. They were, and they were also obviously the people that lived at that time. Mark chapter 8. This is another time that Jesus used the statement, this generation. The Pharisees came and began to argue with him, to argue with Jesus, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. And he sighed deeply in spirit and said, why does this generation seek a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to it, or no sign will be given to this generation. Matthew 12 also. Then some of the scribes and the Pharisees answered him, saying, Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you. But he answered them, an evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, but behold, something greater than Solomon is here. Luke 11, verse 29. So these are all the times that Jesus uses the phrase, this generation. And as we are showing, every single time, this phrase, this generation, every single time, it always means the generation he's addressing, the generation he is living in. And a generation in the Bible is any group of people living at the same time, or even more specifically, more prophetically, a 40-year period of the people living at the same time. So now in Luke 11, it says, when the crowds were increasing, he began to say, this generation is an evil generation. It seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. And he will say the same thing that he said up there in Matthew. So he says here at the end, the men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. Scribes and Pharisees seek a sign, but no sign will be given to this generation except the sign of Jonah. That is the resurrection. Clearly, it is the people alive at the same time that Jesus spoke. What about when Jesus was condemning the Pharisees and he used the phrase, this generation? In Matthew 23, verse 35, he says, so that on you may come the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, these things will come upon this generation. Same thing is said in Luke chapter number 11, verse number 50, so that the blood of the prophets shed from the foundation of the world may be charged against this generation. From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who perished between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, it will be required of this generation. The Pharisees will receive the punishment they deserve. It is clear this generation refers to the people alive at the time that Jesus spoke. There is no other referent on which the phrase can be hung. the emphasis applied by truly I say to you, yes, I tell you, support the intended immediacy of the warning. Therefore, now we come to the eschatological statements. Mark 13, verse 30. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Matthew 24, 34. Truly I say to you, the generation will not pass away, or this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And Luke 21, 32. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all has taken place. All the events described in the Olivet Discourse, including the return of the Son of Man and the end of days, will take place before this generation. The people alive at the time Jesus spoke has passed away. This is plainly in line with the other predictions made about the coming of days. So Pastor Boaz Macharia from Kenya says, let me put up his statement again. He says that full preterists misinterpret near and this generation so that they lose their prophetic effect. Are full preterists misinterpreting the meaning of the statement this generation? Because every single time that Jesus uses the words this generation, every single time, apart from the ones that in Matthew 24 where they're claiming it does not mean the same thing, it always means the same thing. So what is the basis of saying that in Matthew 24 it means something different from all the other times? There is no explanation. They just want to make it something future to themselves without any grammatical basis, without any exegetical basis, without really any reasoning apart from that's what we think it should be. But Pastor Boaz and others say we are the false ones. They are twisting the words of Jesus to mean what they want them to mean, but we are the false ones. We are the heretics. All right. Okay. Now let's go to some scriptures here. So I want us to go to Matthew 24. Okay. So in Matthew 24, I want you to see what Jesus says, okay, about this generation. Now, at the beginning of Matthew 24, Jesus is leaving the temple. His disciples point out to him the buildings of the temple. Jesus tells them, you see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. So that's one thing. So in verse number 2, Jesus says the temple is going to be destroyed totally. One thing, the destruction of the temple. The disciples ask him in verse number 3, tell us, when will these things be concerning the destruction of the temple? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So these are three things that the disciples ask. Are these three things related or are they unrelated? So Jesus in verse number 4 begins to give them signs of when these things will take place. He tells them there will be deception. Many will come in my name. He tells them there will be wars and rumors of wars. He tells them that nation will rise against nation. He tells them that kingdoms will fight against kingdoms. Famines, earthquakes, all these are but the beginning of birth pains. They will deliver you, the 12, you, the disciples who are asking me, up to tribulation and put you to death. You'll be hated by all for my name's sake. And many will fall away. False prophets will arise. There will be lawlessness. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. So Jesus gives all these signs, including the abomination of desolation, including the great tribulation in verse number 21, including the cosmic signs in verse number 29, after the great tribulation, the sun, moon, and stars, including the coming of the Son of Man on clouds with power and glory, including the gathering of the elect by angels. And then he says in verse number 33, now, I want you to pay attention to the grammar, because surely Jesus, the creator of the universe, knows how to use language. Now watch what he says. So also, verse 33, so also when you see what? When you see what? All these things. Wait a minute. What all things? When you see all these things, what do you mean? Well, I have spent the last 32 scriptures, 32 verses, or 30 verses if you want to be more specific, giving you certain signs, deceptions, wars, rumors of wars, tribulation, persecutions, love of falling away, all these things, cosmic signs coming on, all the Jesus summarizes all the things that he has given as signs together. He does not distinguish them. He does not say some of these things are about this date and some of these things are about another date. Jesus puts all the signs together. Remember, we are being charged as full preterists of being heretics and false teachers and evil people, non-Christians according to Pastor Boaz Masharia. But I want us to pay attention to Jesus. Jesus will either justify us or Jesus will judge us. Pastor Boaz, Jesus will either justify your words that you have spoken against us, or he will condemn you for them. So also when you see all these things, you know he is near at the very gates. So therefore, all the signs in Matthew 24 are a precedent to the coming of the Lord. All of the signs. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all, not some, not most, but all these things take place. Jesus does not categorize the signs into separate events. He does not. He simply does not. In fact, Jesus emphatically puts all the signs together and then he puts them under the banner, this generation. So whatever this generation means, this generation was to see all of the signs. And in fact, in classical futurism, most futurists say that Jesus is saying that the final generation is the one that will see all the signs. So that all the signs were going to be kept hidden until the final generation. In classical futurism, it is only the final generation that sees all of the signs. That's classic futurism. There is no scholar who suggests that the signs would be seen by all generations. Not a single scholar that I know of. Because all of the signs in Matthew 24 are to be experienced, to be observed by this generation. So, whether this generation is present to Jesus or future to Jesus, only one of two generations are able to see the signs. Either the generation of Jesus, which is naturally the meaning of the word, the phrase this generation, or a much future generation from Jesus. There is no middle and there is no middle ground. There is no space where Jesus says some of the things will be seen by this generation and some of the things will be seen by that generation. No, Jesus says that all of the things would be seen by this generation. Well, all of the things must necessarily include verse number 2. There will not be left here one stone left out upon another. That was the basis of the questions of Jesus. So, is there any exegetical basis? Is there any exegetical basis to delay and postpone this generation more than 2,000 years? There is none. And in fact, to delay the phrase this generation to 2,000 years later is to directly contradict the words of Jesus, because Jesus said the temple and all the other signs were all going to happen in one generation. History tells us that the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed within exactly 40 years of Matthew 24. Within the generation. The destruction of the temple was one of the signs. But Jesus says that all of the signs take place in the same generation. So either Jesus was right about the temple, which Pastor Boaz agrees that Jesus did prophesy about the temple. But if Jesus did prophesy about the temple, then he also prophesied that all the other things were going to happen together with the destruction of the temple, because those are the explicit words of Jesus. The full preterist is simply being faithful to the words of Jesus Christ. The full preterist is not trying to do some theological gymnastics and to split passages that clearly have no split in them. None. It is the futurists like Boaz Macharia who are twisting the words of Jesus Christ. It is the full preterist who is actually being faithful to the words of Jesus Christ. Now, I will the thing about near, I will only mention it. I will not show you scriptures. He says that we make the word near to lose its prophetic effect. We full preterists make the word near to lose its prophetic effect. Now, because he does not spend a lot of time explaining what it means, I'm not going to spend time there. If he ever gets back to me, if he ever addresses this apologetic exercise that I'm doing right now against his polemic, I want him to show me any time where in the Bible the statement near was ever used of an event that was thousands of years later. One time. Because the word near is used many times in the Bible. It is near. The time is near. The day of the Lord is near. But in every time that the Bible uses the word near, the event that the prophet is prophesying about is always imminent and near to the prophet. Whether it's Joel, whether it's Isaiah, whether it's Jeremiah, they always speak about things that are near to them. The word near in the Bible never, ever means something that is not near. So let's go to the next charge. So now he comes into the historical argument. And he says preterists, the word preterist comes from the Latin word for past. This false idea of preterist first came into theological writing in 1614 as a Spanish Jesuit priest, Luis de Alcazar, attempted to write against the Reformation's historicist position of the interpretation of prophecy. This false doctrine sat quietly for many years, and then in 1878, James Stewart Russell wrote a book called The Parousia, a critical inquiry into the New Testament doctrine of our Lord's second coming. Eventually, this era died down, but in recent years, a number of internet warriors and self-taught, self-appointed pastors and alleged theologians have again revived the idea that the resurrection is past and that the judgment is behind us, and the world we are living in is what the hope of the Christian life looks like. So that's quite a mouthful. So I'm going to address that part now. So, is it true, according to Pastor Boaz, is it true that the preterist ideas, number one, that they are false? Number two, is it true that the preterist ideas first came into existence in the year 1614? Those are the two things I want to deal with first. What does the word preterist mean? The word preterist simply means past, something that was done in the past. So, by definition, all Christians are preterists. Pastor Boaz, in case you do not know how to define words, you are a preterist. The question is not whether you are a preterist or not. The question is whether you are a full preterist or whether you are a partial preterist. You are one of the two, automatically. Let me prove it to you. Preterist means past. Pastor Boaz Masharia, and those of you who watch me now or later, do you believe that the exodus of Israel from Egypt by Moses happened in the past? Yes or no? I know the answer is yes. Do you believe that King Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem in 587 BC? Yes or no? I know the answer is yes. Most importantly, do you believe that Jesus was born in the past by a virgin called Mary more than or almost 2,000 years ago, and that same Jesus died upon a Roman cross at Golgotha, and that Jesus rose up on the third day and he ascended to heaven 40 days later? Do you believe that is in our past? Because all those things were prophesied. See, preterism is the idea that some or all of the prophecies of the Bible were fulfilled in the past. So you are a partial preterist, whether you know it or not. The only difference between you and I is that I'm a full preterist, but we are both preterists. So when you say in your statement here that the preterist is a false idea and that preterism came into existence in 1614, that belies your ignorance. That belies just your simple ignorance. This article you did not write, Pastor Boaz. This article you copied and pasted from someone on the internet. That is a fact. I know you did not write this article in any form. I know you copied and pasted everything that is in this article. You did not do the homework yourself. You simply copied somebody else's idea and you said this is your polemic. You are a thief of ideas, Pastor Boaz. And the ideas, because you don't even understand what is being said, that's why you are making such very foolish errors. Because every Christian is a preterist. Every Christian believes that many prophecies were fulfilled in the past. That's what preterism is. So, did the idea that some or any of the Bible ideas, Bible prophecies were fulfilled in the past, did that begin in 1614? Oops. It's now telling me I need to drink some water. That's my sensor for glucose. Okay. So, Pastor Boaz Masharia says that the false idea of preterism first came into writing in 1614. That is false. Is it true that there was a Spanish Jesuit priest who attempted, not just attempted, but did a pretty excellent job in writing against the Reformation's historicist position? Yes, that part is correct. But Louis Alcazar was not the first person to come up with the preterist idea. Louis Alcazar was simply the first person to give an organized exegetical writing showing that what the reformers were saying about the Pope was not biblically correct. Because the reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin were saying that the Pope in the 17th century was the man of lawlessness. The reformers in the 17th century were saying that the last days were upon them and that Jesus was about to return in their days. And so this Jesuit priest on the side of the Roman Catholics fought and said, no, that's not the correct interpretation of the scriptures. And he was correct. The reformers were wrong about that. Remember, because I said this in part number 1, the reformers were correct in showing, the reformers were correct in showing that the Roman Catholics were wrong about their doctrine of salvation for more than 1,000 years. The reformers were correct in correcting the church. The Catholics were correct in showing that the reformers were wrong about their identification of the Antichrist. Because Pastor Boaz, are you saying that you agree with the reformers that the Pope in the 17th century was the man of lawlessness and was the Antichrist and was the beast of Revelation? Is that what you're saying? Pastor Boaz, do you hold a historicist position on eschatology? I know you do not. I know you do not. So therefore, when you bring up the Jesuit priest as your proof that full preterism is a heresy, you are shooting yourself in the foot, because you do not even understand what Luis Alcazar was fighting against. You do not understand what the argument was. You copied and pasted the things from the internet, and then you now say that the people who preach preterism today, you call them, what did you call them? You call them a number of internet warriors. That's what you call them. And self-taught, self-appointed pastors and alleged theologians. So Pastor Boaz Macharia, who appointed you? You are writing these things on Facebook. You have never, ever, ever written a theological paper at any time of your life. I am not even sure you have gone to Bible school. Maybe you have. I know you have never published a theological paper. I have published at least 2 books. But you are saying I'm a self-appointed, alleged theologian. Show me your published works. Show me your published works. Because the proof has to be in the pudding. Put your money where your mouth is. Show me your quality. Because it's me you are attacking. I know it's me you are attacking. I am sure it's me you are attacking. Because I was the first person to introduce preterism in Kenya. I know that for a fact. I know that preterism is in the country of Kenya because by the grace of God, I introduced it. And I'm thankful that God gave me the grace and the privilege to be the first person to introduce it in the country of Kenya. Because as far as I know, before the year 2019, I had never ever heard of any Kenyan anywhere speaking about preterism. Excuse me, guys. I need to check my blood sugar. The sensor keeps going up. So, we will keep dealing with the water until it comes back down. So, Pastor Boaz says, we are internet warriors. We are self-taught, self-appointed pastors. You can see the bitterness. That's why I told you this man is very bitter. Now, meanwhile, if he had just bothered to do just a little bit of research, this is what he would have found out. I went on ChatGPT, which is just an internet tool like you can use on Google, and I said to ChatGPT, ChatGPT doesn't know me, ChatGPT doesn't care about who I am. I said to ChatGPT, are there early church fathers who taught and believed in preterism in any form? So this is the question that I asked ChatGPT. Remember, ChatGPT is just a search tool. So I told ChatGPT, I want you to go on the internet and I want you to search for me any early church fathers who believed or taught in any preterism idea, who believed that any of the prophecies were fulfilled in the past concerning the end times. And this is what ChatGPT answered. Excellent question and a very important one. The short answer is yes, several early church fathers held partial preterist views. That is, they believed that many, but not all, prophecies, including much of the Olivet Discourse and even parts of Revelation, were fulfilled in the first century destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. However, we always have to be honest. However, no early church father taught full preterism, that all prophecy, including the resurrection and final judgment, was fulfilled in AD 70. That view arose much later in the 17th to 19th centuries. Now, let me say this. Louis Alcazar did not present a full preterist position. The Roman Catholics at no point have ever believed in full preterism, ever. So Louis Alcazar in the 17th century did not say full preterism. What Louis Alcazar did is that he presented a systematic exegetical work showing partial preterism, proving that the majority of end-time prophecies were fulfilled in the past, and therefore the only thing that was left was the second coming. So he was not even presenting a full preterist position, like Pastor Boaz suggests. Now, here is a detailed background. Eusebius of Caesarea, in AD, who lived between AD 260 and 340, is an early church father. He's a father of church history. He had strong preterist elements. He wrote a book called Ecclesiastical History, Demonstratio Evangelica. What he taught. Eusebius explicitly identifies the abomination of desolation and much of Matthew 24 with the Roman destruction in AD 70. So, Pastor Boaz says, before 1640, no one had ever suggested that. That is demonstrably false, Pastor Masharia. So, Demonstrata Evangelica in section 3.5 says all these things were fulfilled in this way in the siege of Jerusalem. He, Eusebius, also connects the persecution of the early church to prophecies in Daniel and Revelation. So, Eusebius says that the persecution of the church in the book of Revelation and in the book of Daniel were all fulfilled before AD 70. Now remember, Eusebius is living before 300 AD or around 300 AD. He is considered to be the father of church history. He says that parts of Revelation were fulfilled before AD 70. But how could parts of Revelation be fulfilled before AD 70 if Revelation was written in AD 90? Are you seeing the issue with that? So anyway, it says here in this article, preterist approach for Eusebius was in the Olivet Discourse, in Daniel, and in the early parts of Revelation. He was a futurist regarding the final resurrection and the judgment? Yes, we acknowledge that. Number two, Clement of Alexandria, living between 150 to 215 AD. Clement of Alexandria had moderate preterist ideas. Key point, he referred to Jesus' prophecies of judgment as fulfilled historically, likely in connection with the fall of Jerusalem. Quote, he viewed the Jewish nation as already judged and the temple as no longer standing as God's dwelling. That's Clement of Alexandria. So Clement of Alexandria says the temple of end times was already destroyed. However, Clement was a futurist. What I'm trying to show here is Pastor Masharia, Boaz Masharia, says preterism came into existence in the 17th century. Church history tells us as early as the 2nd century, many church fathers were already reading the scriptures and saying, whoa, this got fulfilled. They were partial preterists. So therefore, the idea that preterism came into existence in the 17th century cannot be in any way supported. Now, it would be one thing if you were saying full preterism did not come into existence until the 16th century, and I would tell you even that is wrong, because the first person to teach about full preterism would probably be Moses Stewart in maybe early 1804, somewhere around there, maybe 1830. So it's not even, it's much later than the 16th century. But because you're not doing your homework, because you're not really actually checking your sources, you are just copying and pasting, you cannot provide a sensible polemic or defense of what you're trying to say. So now, so there's Clement of Alexandria, and I'm not going to read all of this. There is Origen. He was also a preterist. He says the days of vengeance were fulfilled when Jerusalem was destroyed, on his commentary on Matthew. All these are futurists, but they had preteristic ideas. What about Athanasius? Athanasius lived between 296 AD and 373. He writes that the kingdom of Christ has already come and is now filling the world, implying the prophecies of the kingdom were fulfilled in the church. He viewed the old covenant was completely ended and Jerusalem as judged in the coming of Christ. So Athanasius thought that the coming of Christ had already happened. John Chrysostom, living 349 to 407, was a partial preterist in the Gospels. In his homilies on Matthew, he interprets Matthew 24, 15 to 21 as referring to the Roman armies under Titus and the destruction of Jerusalem. He speaks of the tribulation that came upon the Jews in those days in his homily 75 on the book of Matthew. Okay? Hopefully we are together so far. Now, Jerome, living in the 4th century, 347 to 420, he was explicitly preterist in parts of Daniel and Matthew 24. Commenting on Daniel 9:27, he says it referred to the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus, the abomination of desolation in the holy place when the Roman standards were set up in the temple. Commentary on Daniel. There is Augustine. This is also 4th century. He is a transitional figure. Early writings such as The City of God suggest partial preterism, especially his belief that Christ's kingdom was already inaugurated and that the church age is the millennium. So Augustine believed that Revelation 19 was already fulfilled and that the church was already in Revelation 20, the 1,000 years. Augustine is a central figure in church history. No one can discount Augustine. Augustine believed Revelation was fulfilled all the way up to Revelation 19 by AD 70. And that the church entered into the 1,000 years back in AD 70 or thereabouts. This is Augustine, the guy who is the who is the precursor to Calvinism. He believed the church was already in the 1,000 years. Boaz Masharia, you are a Calvinist. You are a believer in the doctrine of grace. Fine. Do you also believe what Augustine believed? Do you believe that the church is already in the 1,000 years right now? And that it has been in the 1,000 years for a long time? 1 second, guys. Hello. So guys, since we are at the 42-minute mark, I am going to end this part number 2 here because I have somebody outside that needs me to deal with their car. I also repair cars on the side. So what I wanted to show you here is that Pastor Boaz Masharia says that we are teaching something that only came into existence in the 17th century. I am showing that church history shows that preterism existed and was working and can be documented as existing in the very, very early parts of church history. Now, did full preterism exist in the church fathers? No. And we discussed that in part number 1. When I come back for part number 3, which I will come back in the next 15 minutes. So if you are really interested in this, please wait for it. I will come and start another one and we'll go into part number 3. I will continue taking apart this nonsensical argument by Pastor Boaz Masharia, and I will show it has no legs to stand on. God bless you until the next time.